The remaster of Onimusha 2 Samurai's Destiny, the second installment of Capcom's old samurai saga, is a reminder that actually games age much better than you'd think, and that old doesn't automatically mean bad, quite the opposite. While games have come a long way, there certainly are things to learn from some of the classics again. Onimusha began as a samurai action prototype on the original PlayStation before becoming a 4-part series on the PS2, which was a mixture of Capcom's own Resident Evil and katana combat, where you face off against evil forces like a demonic Nobunaga in feudal Japan. I wouldn't place the first game or this newly remastered sequel among Capcom's biggest classics of this era, such as Resident Evil 4 or Devil May Cry 3, but that only highlights the point. While not free of a few flaws, it boasts game design virtues that have kinda gone missing in the years before this remaster of Onimusha 2 came out, making this title all the more refreshing. Samurai's Destiny isn't an open world epic like Ghost of Yotai or Assassin's Creed Shadows. Neither is this remaster a full-blown remake like Resident Evil, but it doesn't need to be any of these things. As already said, Onimusha channels both Resident Evil and also traditional action-adventure games, which means that you have to explore strange mansions and dungeons full of abstruse puzzles and traps. However, the focus here is not on survival, but on action. Similar to Devil May Cry, each map throws countless demons at you to slash through, except that here the camera angles are static like in the original RE games, while puzzles play a bigger role and the combat itself isn't quite as deep as its big Capcom brother Devil May Cry. However, the second game had slightly more combat variety than the first. Throughout the campaign, protagonist Jubai unlocks 4 melee weapons, a katana, a spear, dual blades and a hammer, each with a basic attack, a charging move, a magic attack and a blocking mechanic. By exploring the map, you can also unlock a few extra combos. Gathering enough collectibles also grants him the ability to briefly transform into a stronger demon. Frankly, all that already sounds more complicated than it is. It might feel like a pretty simple button mashing game at first, especially compared to newer titles with ever expanding skill trees or special abilities. But in reality, you don't necessarily need any of that to make an engaging action game. Onimusha relies on classic arcade-style action, where hefty combat feedback and a good variety of enemy types is more than enough to provide an addictive gameplay loop. It doesn't need big skill tree menus or customization options to give your katana a 2% extra fire resistance or whatever. The only real downside is a severe lack of truly interesting boss fights. But apart from that, it's engaging enough to hack through these often tough enemy groups and increase your game score to improve your equipment every now and then. Instead of relying on bloat trying to justify some enormous day one price tag, this game still relied on replayability through unlockable content and dedicated extra modes, something I personally always preferred. It features a relatively fast-paced 7 to 10 hour campaign without much fluff. It's all about fast action and using your wits from time to time. Speaking of which, exploring and puzzle solving feels equally rewarding because of its traditional game structure. Onimusha 2 isn't particularly hard, not at all. It also doesn't actually have the greatest puzzle design compared to something like Resident Evil. Way too many Sudoku-style puzzles in these dungeons feel pretty forced, yet it feels rewarding to find something like an extra firearm in a shack through your own initiative. It's all the more motivating to discover secrets without intrusive open-world GPS systems and tutorial boxes guiding you to each item step by step, something many later action adventures have forgotten. Not to mention that it's refreshing to explore small handcrafted mansions and villages instead of wading through massive checklists on an icon-filled open-air map. The game also doesn't have tons of loot, but because of that, every HP upgrade or optional equipment piece that you find feels even more valuable. It all goes back to that timeless formula established by games like Zelda: A Link to the Past. Admittedly, back in the day, this game design approach started to wear thin, but after gaming trends have turned the other way, returning to a title like Onimusha 2 becomes a breath of fresh air. The remaster brings a few conveniences like an autosave, but thankfully Capcom didn't dump down any core elements like they did in the controversial Dead Rising remaster. Speaking of which, for Onimusha 2 they also didn't go so far as to remaster all of the graphics. Instead, they made the old game available with a higher resolution and a widescreen format. And that's okay, because for the original game, the backgrounds were pre-rendered pictures which always looked more graphically advanced than the real-time elements. So the character models might stick out, but the environments still look good to great. Especially the water looks downright modern because it isn't interactive. If they are poorly emulated, static backgrounds can sometimes become pixelated, but they were perfectly upscaled for Samurai's Destiny. Not to mention that fixed cameras, despite being somewhat of an emergency solution on PS1, at some points became an art form in itself, similar to pixel games, with a very distinct cinematography which looks better than ever in HD. Now, similar to the remaster of the first Resident Evil, the analog controls aren't perfect. These pre-rendered Capcom games originally used tank controls, where you held the stick forward to move the characters in a straight line through all the changing camera angles. With the analog stick, it can occasionally happen that you steer Jubai back to the previous map by accident. Overall though, not a big problem.
That does it! Outside now!
The one thing that hasn't aged too gracefully though is the storytelling. Jubai meets many comrades who also jump to your side in battle when your life bar is low. A decent gameplay addition, but in the story the characters all have either dramatic backstories or funny quirks, of which none really work. It's a loose string of movie cliches, and I also found the character designs, in particular the demons, pretty kitschy. Worst of all is the amateurish voiceover, which unlike some of the gameplay elements, is a product of its time in a not so great way.
As you are going to die soon, why not now?
It's so bad that I can't even enjoy it ironically, but maybe that's just me. Thankfully, besides the nicely redone backgrounds, the soundtrack also helps carry the atmosphere, and none of it takes away from the addictive gameplay. The actual biggest shortcoming is the way Onimusha 2 was released. Capcom usually makes bigger bundles, such as the Devil May Cry trilogy or all the fighting game collections. Unfortunately, they decided to drop Onimusha one by one. So ironically, while the game itself is a nice reminder of those times when publishers were able to release full-fledged games with lots of replayability at a low price relatively quickly, this remaster doesn't feel like the best deal anymore. It's especially disappointing not to have the fan favorite Onimusha 3 in here too. Admittedly, there may be legal reasons for that, as they might not have the rights to portray the actor Sean Reno anymore. Still, while Onimusha's competition is bigger than ever, with big, epic samurai games releasing at a constant pace, the classic nature of this game, with a unique retro look shining brighter than ever, makes for a very welcome change, and I hope that the series will stay true to its roots in the future.